They say to begin with the end in mind. Here we are, the final chapter, Module 5, the conclusion. As the curious scientist you are, we've all embarked on a journey, guided by the power of Procedos, task and target, and facilitated by the dialogue, learning by doing, and the curious exploration of the questions that have arose during this course. It's fun to note the two most costly words in the English language. I forgot. And while this course really aimed to try and help you understand the process of functional movement applied to Procedos, the application of applied functional science, and the complexities of the Gray Institute's thought process, let me remind you of the simple power of your observational skills. You see, friends, looking back to the beginning of the course, we started with a story. The story was about a marksman, a wise marksman who once basically said, unless you can see your target, it doesn't matter how skilled you are, you're never gonna hit it. We can take that wisdom and apply it to our clients. If our clients don't know where they're going, if they don't have the end in mind, they're never gonna get there. So that opened up the story that is Procedos. And that puts you as the curious scientist, the main character, the MVP, most valuable professional in this story of ideally evolving the way that your thought process works and the way that your training could potentially take place. We set the stage by saying there are 3 major modules that we're going to roll through, building up the meat and potatoes after the introduction and conclusion, and each of those modules had a very specific framework. Allow me now to recap what that story looked like. We started off by saying we want to learn what function is. And we very quickly defined function as the needs and wants of an individual required to accomplish the goal. The overarching theme then went into how do we apply Procedos? How do we take these common foundational exercises and vary them? And finally, we said, hey, we have this R3 programming model. We'd like you to memorize it. And as we come now to this culminating module, this final video in this online course, I'd like you to take a second and revisit those objectives that you set out to in the beginning. Were they fulfilled? Did they raise new questions? Heck, were they even exceeded in terms of your expectations? We let out to basically create a framework with the product to inspire you, to enhance your capacity to treat those you care about, whatever your profession is. Ideally, as a curious scientist, we then opened up the framework to the R3 model. And we said, okay, how do we restore normalized motion in the body? And we broke that down into the principle of the functional sphere. And if you remember back, the functional sphere is all the available motion from fixed position, whether it's by your arms, your feet, or both. And we realized that this functional sphere is very powerful when it comes to assessing what the body needs. And we're doing this qualitatively, subjectively, each and every time potentially our clients come in. We have a standardized measure that we can see how they're feeling. Einstein famously once said, not all that is important can be measured, and not all that is measured is important. So we realize that the qualitative, the subjective experience of the client is paramount to our ability to uplift and help them enhance their functionality. We then very quickly realized that that functional sphere has 4 major concepts. The first being that motion, which is something that happens at a joint, is driven. And we have all these different drivers in our body, from our feet to our hips to our hands to the most powerful, which is our eyes. And we realized very quickly that these drivers create this chain reaction that when one thing moves, everything moves. And if I look up, I get hip extension. If I reach down with my hand, I get hip internal rotation. The list goes on and on. The curiosity creates all of these questions to which we encourage you, seek the answers. Remembering that training is simplified on the Procedos, we then took our restore function and we said, if I have a driver that creates a chain reaction, well, I want to get mobility and stability back in the system. I want to give the body, this client in front of me, what it needs. And keeping things simple, once again, we basically covered 90% of what the body needs by saying, hey, when I take a step, there's a lot going on. I become curious, I learn about it. But for the purposes of this course, we said, hey, why don't we drive the knee a little bit? If we're on here on 5 and 9, why don't we drive around and create normalized motion? Then after we create the mobility, we say, hey, let's stabilize that sucker. Let's reduce our base of support, and let's go ahead and really drive and create stability to the system. We wrap this all up by saying there's a process of local to global. We want to go more specific to then become global because we are these fascinating and complex creatures. And it's this appreciation for our complexity that allows us to simply apply a process. We encapsulated that warm-up portion in the R1 module. Now that R1 module, the first piece of function, giving way to what the body needs, was then opened up to what the client wants. Now this is where things got really cool because this is the meat and potatoes. This is why people come to us, because they want to see a change. They want to take where they're at now and go to a better place. And we help facilitate that by employing all the concepts in the R2. And remembering to what I said before, I forgot being as costly as it is. You've been given the gift of a cheat sheet right in front of you here, to where we have all of these phenomenal tools for reference, and we use the R2 module as a principle of observational essentials to decode all of that. To use our power of observation to say, okay, if I want to take a foundational exercise, which is listed here in a logical sequence to be followed, and I want to add a variation, how can I use the concept of 3D movement that authenticates actual human life, whether it's sport, whether it's walking, whether it's sitting in a chair, whether it's swinging around a child, whether it's doing anything you can possibly imagine, to authenticate that and allow that client to have a successful relationship that is fun, engaging, and variable. And we said variability is important because of the SAID principle, specific adaptation to imposed demand. Now this is incredibly important because if we learn it, we own it. And when we're talking about building resiliency, building up this buffer against injury, building up a sport and performance aspect, building up even a strength conditioning, a sweat, a feel-good response, variability is key. It keeps things engaging. It allows us to be creative. And as curious scientists, we once again continue to ask questions. And these questions now give way to more answers because we learn by doing. And we understand that in R2, that's in fact what we're doing. We're using pain as our guide. We're becoming curious and exploring how the body works. We're diving deeper into understanding how our clients respond to them. And we're using the target-driven system by assigning tasks to allow our clients to engage in subconscious activities. We realized very quickly that clients will leave us. They're going to take off. So that's why we came up with the react portion, the third part of our R3 programming model that says, in real life, we react to everything around us. And we focused in on the physical reactions, the external stimuli, knowing that our principle for the react portion is task and target-driven exercise fueled by external cues. Now this is where we literally had fun. We learned how to play. We learned about novelty. We learned about keeping clients engaged, and we learned about manipulating these very key concepts of sound, of sight, of kinesthetic or touch to create an unlimited amount of games that allow our clients to authenticate what's happening in real life. Because this is where it gets fun. This is where it becomes real. This is where we say, if I'm stepping off a curb, and I've restored the motion in my ankle, I've reinforced the pattern of a lunge, now I need to react to getting into a curb and getting out to protect my ACL from the rehab side, or from a sport performance side to be able to plant and kick a soccer ball and have the stability, the mobility, the strength control, and most importantly, the confidence to execute this functional movement effectively. We know that Procedos was created to solve problems. The problem it was created to solve is to give a systematic approach with immediate feedback, tasks, and targets to you, the MVP, the curious scientist, and now a graduate of the Procedos Online Platform 9 training course. This allows you to have an inspired curiosity to what it means to be a movement professional. This allows you to differentiate yourself from the pack, to go out there and to create a logical progressive system that not only engages your client more, but creates real results. And ultimately, while it's up to you, friends, to decide what you take away from this course, we hope that this curated, cultivated journey has left you inspired to become curious. You see, while learning is a lifelong skill, and just as the marksman only perfected his craft with practice, we realize that the only way to practice is to explore. The only way to explore is to observe. The only way to observe is to become curious, and the circle goes on and on and on. And while it might be dizzying that we can wrap our heads around everything that has happened here with the Procedos, allow me to leave you with a very simple, wise saying. You see, if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for his life. Friends, this is what curiosity does to cultivate an environment of learning. And the Procedos platform is your tool to continuously experience learning by doing. So we know you're ready. We got your back. Go out there and get on it.